So hello there class, and welcome to this week's lesson. Today we're going to be reviewing chapter 5 from your textbook. So today's lesson is really two in one. First we'll be talking about designer drugs, and then we'll be switching our discussion to performance enhancing drugs. Designer drugs, or synthetic drugs, have been around pretty much since the 1980s. With the push of the Just Say No campaign that was popular during the Reagan administration, there was probably some effect at outlining and appreciating the dangers of traditional drugs of abuse such as heroin or cocaine, which are all derived from natural sources: heroin from the poppy plant, cocaine from the coca plant. During the 80s, chemists devised many different substances derived from synthetic compounds to elicit similar responses to traditional drugs, which also came with the misconceptions that these designer drugs were safer than your traditional drugs, which has proven over the years not to be the case. Now, drug enforcement agencies have had a very difficult time banning these substances because lawyers have determined that these drugs did not fit under the classification of scheduled drugs that were already banned under the current laws. It wasn't until 1996 when Congress passed the Federal Analog Act, which outlawed substances that were chemically similar to traditional drugs. This law, however, is difficult to enforce because the higher and lower limits of what was considered similar chemically was open to various interpretations. So one of the first synthetic substances to talk about are the synthetic cathinones, or what's more commonly known as bath salts. Now, when you hear the term bath salts, you think of something that you would find at a spa to give you a nice, soothing, relaxing bath. But that's hardly the case. These are synthetic drugs that mimic the effects of traditional stimulants, such as amphetamines and cocaine. However, they produce much greater adverse physical effects. They're made from multiple different compounds and are often found and sold legally in smoking tobacco shops, gas stations, and other locations. They're often marketed as products such as plant food, aromatherapy agents, and potpourri. Manufacturers tend to skirt past the law by labeling these products as, quote, not fit for human consumption. However, they likely bank on the consumer's knowledge to somewhat read between the lines and understand what they're saying, and their understanding of what these products are really intended for. Physical effects of these drugs include things such as paranoia, hallucinations, increased sociability, increased sex drive, panic attacks, excited delirium associated with psychosis as well. Some of you may remember in 2012 the headlines were flooded with reports of a well-known violent incident that occurred in Miami where a psychotic naked man attacked a homeless man living under a highway and literally ripped off his face with his teeth and ate part of his face. Law enforcement had to fire multiple rounds at this individual before bringing him to a stop. It was later found on autopsy that there were high levels of these synthetic cathinones or bath salts found in his blood, and this was most likely responsible for this ghoulish violent attack. The media popularized this incident by labeling it as the first trend of what was called zombie attacks. Synthetic cannabinoids, or synthetic marijuana, has also become more popular on the city streets. Again, these are synthetic chemicals with similar properties to marijuana, but are in no way, shape, and form chemically similar to traditional marijuana. Like bath salts, these chemicals are packaged and would appear to be legal products and go under the street names of Special K, Molly, Spice, and as well as others. The problem is when people think they're getting the similar effect of traditional marijuana, the adulterants that are being put in these products are extremely unpredictable and can lead to complications such as severe agitation, anxiety, increased heartbeat and blood pressure, nausea, vomiting, muscle spasms, seizures and tremors, and severe withdrawal symptoms when discontinued. It's not uncommon when you have a specific location selling a particular toxic batch of these products, distributing them among the neighborhood individuals, leading to these outbreaks. People flooding the streets intoxicated on these substances, exhibiting again these zombie-like behaviors. There have been reports in Brooklyn and the Bronx of mass casualty incidents involving police and EMS responding to multiple cases of people poisoned from this exposure to these substances. And like the typical bath salts, these products are very difficult to ban legally. Probably one of the most popular of the newer synthetic or designer drugs is MDMA, or otherwise what's known as ecstasy. This drug was experimented with therapeutically in the early 70s as part of psychotherapy exercises to help enhance couples' relationships and promoting feelings of empathy and openness. In the late 1980s, this drug saw a resurgence in popular dance clubs and raves. The desired effect of this drugs include association with sexual closeness and increased sexual interest. However, it also results in decreased ability to perform sexually. Chemically, MDMA increases dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin in the brain. Another popular effect of this drug is its stimulant properties, which allows people to dance for hours on end without exhaustion in these marathon-like dance parties. Now, these popular raves involve extremely crowded conditions under hot lights and poor ventilatory conditions, leading to things such as heat stroke and exhaustion, and another situation called water intoxication. I know that sounds very bizarre. How can one become intoxicated with water? The problem is that during these raves, people dance for hours on end, become extremely hot, extremely dehydrated, and tend to drink massive amounts of plain water, gallons and gallons at a time, without ingesting any food or other substances with electrolytes. And in doing so, they basically wash out their sodium levels in their blood and produce a condition called hyponatremia, or low sodium level, which can promote dehydration and even irretractable seizures and also lead to death. Benzylpiperazine, or BZP, is another synthetic drug that is popular in the drug scene, although probably more popular in Europe than it is in the United States, and is promoted similar to ecstasy. It can have an extremely dangerous synergistic effect or combined effect when combined with alcohol and other drugs. It's become a Scheduled 1 drug since 2002, and ingestion may involve conditions such as dissociative states, psychosis, precipitation of mania, which is seen in people with schizophrenia and other psychotic disorders, and on the extreme end, organ failure, such as kidney shutdown and central nervous system shutdown. We've spoken of before about the issues of fentanyl and narcotic overdose. Fentanyl is a legitimate prescribed drug, narcotic drug, for the management of pain disorders, especially those associated with cancer. It's a synthetic narcotic. However, the bulk of synthetic fentanyl found on the streets today are cheap derivatives of the drug, usually imported from China, which is associated with its street name, China White. As we mentioned previously, fentanyl is anywhere from 50 to 100 times more potent than your strongest cases of heroin, and is often cut into heroin to increase its addictive properties. The spike in recent years of opiate-related overdose deaths can be directly attributed to these knockoff fentanyl products that have been smuggled in from China. So now, the use of performance-enhancing drugs, or otherwise known as ergogenic aids, is nothing new in the world of sports. There are documents that go back as early as the 3rd century BC regarding Greek athletes using mushrooms to enhance their performance in games. In the 1950s, it was widely suspected that Russian athletes and East German athletes were using some type of performance enhancers, although it wasn't readily proved back then. There's a lot of debate as to whether performance-enhancing drugs are a means of cheating or just a means of leveling the playing field. It would be interesting to get your opinions on this. professional and athletic scandals regarding athletes using performance-enhancing drugs. Um, One of the most common of which is anabolic steroids. Um, some noted athletes would be player Jose Canseco, who testified in Congress about the widespread prevalence of anabolic steroids or performance-enhancing use in professional baseball. His book titled Juiced outed some of the major baseball players in the field. Alex Rodriguez, who was a well-known baseball player for the New York Yankees and some other teams in 2009, was found to have performance-enhancing drugs in his system. It's noted that this was the one year he had actually had a successful postseason run in the playoffs. Lance Armstrong, multiple winner of the Tour de France bicycle tournament and testicular cancer survivor, admittedly used aids such as human growth hormone and Epigen, which stimulates red blood cell growth, which enhances oxygen delivery to all the cells. You also had Olympic track star Ben Johnson, who in 1988 was found to have steroids in his system. He was stripped of his titles and continuously denied any wrongdoing, only stating that he believed he was consuming some type of oral rehydration solution. Former linebacker for the NFL, Lyle Alzado, who admittedly used steroids throughout his career and died in his early 40s of brain cancer, which he attributed to his history of steroid use, although it was never medically proven. There's also baseball player Rafael Palmeiro, who, after just 2 weeks after testifying to Congress that he had never used any type of performance-enhancing substance, wound up testing positive for steroids in his bloodstream. So anabolic steroids are chemical compounds which mimic the action of the male hormone testosterone to increase muscle mass and strength. It is well known that this action can give beneficial results to sports that involve a great deal of physical stress and dominance. These substances may be taken orally, topically, or most commonly via intramuscular injection. There's no debate on the effectiveness that these medications have in increasing muscle mass, though at probably a great cost. We'll talk a little bit about former Hall of Fame player Barry Bonds, who holds the Major League home run title in a single season. Although he consistently denied the use of performance-enhancing drugs, you can see that there's been a big difference in his body type over the years. And the use of anabolic steroids leads to a myriad of adverse effects in almost all organ systems, in both male and female. In the female reproductive system, you have irregular menstrual cycles, atrophy of the uterine wall, and sometimes infertility, as well as a higher incidence of cervical and endometrial cancer. In males, you have decreased endogenous hormone production, testicular atrophy, and increase of the incidence of prostate cancer. Anabolic steroids have been a well-known risk factor for increased cardiovascular events such as heart attacks and sudden cardiac death. Liver insufficiency can lead to decreased metabolism of toxins from the body. It can actually lead to breast development in males due to the insufficient conjugation of male-produced estrogen. It's a condition called gynecomastia, which most athletes wind up having surgically corrected. The integumentary system, or the skin system, can demonstrate increases in the amount of acne, abnormal hair growth in females, a condition called hirsutism. Neuropsychiatric involvement can involve mood swings, psychosis, aggressive behavior, and addictive personality traits. And this is just another list or a chart of all the effects of steroids can have. Roid rage is a well-known association with the use of anabolic steroids, which involves the uncontrollable violence associated with steroid use. Anabolic steroids have been found and associated with the increased levels of aggression and withdrawal symptoms. As well, pictured in the slide is former wrestler Chris Benoit, I think I'm saying that name right, who in June of 2007 was found dead along with his wife and young child in their home near Atlanta, Georgia, which was deemed to be a murder-suicide. Chris Benoit allegedly murdered both his wife and son before hanging himself to death. Upon autopsy, it was determined there were a number of different substances in his system, including Xanax and hydrocodone. However, in his toxicology levels showed an extremely abnormal high level of testosterone, suggestive of anabolic steroid use. Another common performance enhancing substance is exogenous or outside of the body human growth hormone. Human growth hormone, or HGH, is normally secreted from the pituitary gland to prevent more normal growth and development of bones and muscles, and some other metabolic activities as well during childhood and adolescence. Exogenous human growth hormone is administered clinically to treat individuals with growth delay and short stature. Athletes have been known to illicitly use human growth hormone to develop extra muscle mass and to recover from injuries more quickly. For anybody who's familiar with wrestling, pictured in the slide is famous wrestler Andre the Giant, who had a condition of abnormal pituitary tumor, which secreted excess HGH from the days of his childhood until the days of his death. This was a condition called acromegaly. The oversecretion of this hormone led to his gigantic stature, a novelty which made him famous in his field. He grew to be, from what I believe, about 7 feet 4 inches and close to about 500 pounds. And you can see him just staturing over his peer wrestlers. The guy on the right, Rocky Johnson, the father of superstar Dwayne Johnson, I actually met as a teenager. Just thought that'd be interesting. It's unfortunate, though, that this oversecretion of growth hormone and his condition of acromegaly, which led to his success in the wrestling field, also is what contributed to his death due to heart failure. And you can see on the bottom right, baseball star we mentioned before, Barry Bonds, although never proven, was very well suspected of taking illicit human growth hormone. Because as you see, big change in his body structure over the years. One thing that doesn't change with normal working out and normal growth of muscle mass is the growth and development of your skull as an adult. And you can see that from the picture on the left and the picture to the right, he has a proportionately larger head than he did as a younger man. So that's definitely gives the suspicion that he was using exogenous HGH as well as other substances. Creatine is a supplement used by professional and amateur athletes, which is quite legal, although in some sports it's kind of frowned upon. It's a popular nutritional supplement which is a naturally occurring amino acid. Its physiological mechanism is somewhat unclear. However, it is going to increase water content in muscles, which can contribute to their size and function. Some studies have suggested that it may improve athletic performance, yet as of this date, the presentation is still unproven. It's not been banned by any professional sports agencies, although it is rather frowned upon. If anybody remembers the baseball season of 1998, probably before most people were born, and the huge home run derby to marathon to break Roger Maris's record of 62 home runs, probably knows about Mark McGwire, who temporarily broke and held the record for most home runs in a season. At the time, he readily admitted using a supplement known as androstenedione, or just andro, which was a legal substance. It was commonly believed that this supplement improved muscle mass, although scientific data was lacking. It was not illicit, it was not illegal, although it was again somewhat frowned upon. It was later determined in 2006 when Mark McGwire had actually used anabolic steroids as well during his home run pursuit. And the sports industry has always been riddled with stimulant type products in an effort to try to improve performance, sometimes on and sometimes off the field. Cocaine, I think if anybody is a football fan remembers Giants great Lawrence Taylor had a huge cocaine problem on and off the field. There was some debate as to whether his football record should be tainted or marked with an asterisk because of this use. Amphetamines have been used probably since the turn of the century, last century I should talk about, in Olympic sports and all sorts of competitions around the field to reduce fatigue and sustain intense exercise. Caffeine has been used in almost every sports arena. May improve short-term endurance. It's very, very difficult to ban caffeine, being that such a legal and common product. There is no research or evidence to show that any of these substances, although they may enhance endurance, do anything to actually improve physical performance in any of these sports. There's also been a history of people using things such as tranquilizers, benzodiazepines, and barbiturates to kind of slow their mind and steady their hand in sports like golf and things that require a lot of psychomotor activity. Again, nothing that's ever been proven to enhance or improve performance. So to recap this lesson today, just go about some of the more pertinent topics. I want you to go back and think about what designer drugs are, where they come from, what kind of stimulated their evolution. Have a little bit of an idea about the Federal Analog Act and how that influences the distribution of designer drugs on the street. Evaluate mass media claims of designer and synthetic drugs. Describe different types of designer drugs and their effects. Assess performance-enhancing drugs in sports and come up with some of your own opinions and ideas. Describe different types of performance-enhancing drugs. And then compare the legal and illegal performance-enhancing drugs as well. And with that, have a great week.